That physician is the best who teaches me how I can be without diseases and pharmaceuticals. That art is easy and simple. But the one to allow any corruption and later cure it is contrived and complicated. Immanuel Kant. In my last lecture, I talked about Kant's world concept of philosophy, according to which philosophy is about wisdom. And wisdom, in turn, is mainly practical. It is about having the right purpose, the right goal, having the highest good as your goal, so that your various purposes and drives don't come into conflict with one another. And as such, the philosopher in the world concept, and I once again remind you that I said everyone should be a philosopher, not in the school concept, but in the world sense of the word. That is what Aufklärung is all about, becoming wise, becoming a philosopher in the world sense. Well, this philosopher in the world sense, Kant says, should be or should act as the lawgiver of reason. So while the various scientists are just technicians of reason, using their reason to achieve various possible purposes, no matter if they are good or bad, the philosopher is oriented on the highest good and can therefore give laws to all human affairs and to all the sciences, to all of the techniques we employ, which mainly are moral laws. Now, before I soon come to conclude all of my lectures on Kant's concept of philosophy and of the philosopher, I want to stay at the word concept of philosophy for this one more lecture. And I want to look at something which is only a side topic, which doesn't have a prominent part in Kant's philosophy, which doesn't really feature in his systematic thinking. But a topic that I think nonetheless is, for one, interesting for our regular life and worth considering. But then also a topic which I think gives a good example and illustration to what I said in the last lecture, and thereby will possibly help you understand better what the philosopher as the wise lawgiver, what that is all about. And this topic I want to talk about is the relationship between philosophy and medicine in Kant's thinking. Because medicine is one of the areas where the philosopher, where the wise person should act as a lawgiver. Now, as a little preface of sorts, we don't really consider philosophy and medicine to really have anything to do with each other. That was not always the case. Throughout the history of philosophy, we can find that quite a few philosophers were in fact mediciners and physicians. Especially in the Middle Ages, we can find that both Maimonides, who was the most important Jewish and Mosian philosopher of the Middle Ages, as well as Ibn Sina, better known in the West as by his Latinized name Avicenna, who is widely considered the most important medieval philosopher of the Islamic world. Both of those were physicians. And wrote works on medicine and practiced medicine, and not just any physicians. Maimonides was the court physician of Saladin, the great sultan who reconquered Jerusalem in the time of the Third Crusade. But this relationship carries over even in more recent times. I myself, of course, when thinking about philosophy and healing and their relationship, first and foremost think about my own father, but also some philosophers that came before that, like Nietzsche, or what concerns us now, like Kant, were concerned with questions of healthy life and how to sustain or regain health. As far as Kant is concerned, what he is saying is that the philosopher, and here of course he doesn't mean the philosopher in the school sense of the word, so not the metaphysician in particular, but rather the philosopher in the word sense, so as a wise lawgiver. The philosopher, he says, can also serve as a physician of sorts, as a healer. The philosopher can also do medicine. However, it was always very important to Kant to strictly separate the various sciences and also the different faculties at university. So he didn't want the faculty of philosophy to get into the area of the faculty of medicine, just like he didn't want it to happen the other way around. So what he is saying is not that the philosopher should steal the physician's work or do the same work as the physician. He is saying they both are concerned with health, but in different ways or with different parts of health. So what then is the difference that Kant sees between the two? And here I must say right away that this is a little harder to answer than in previous cases, when I talked about the differences between different fields, because Kant here is not quite as clear and not quite as systematic. In fact, he gives into different texts from different times, he gives two different divisions between philosophy and medicine. I will talk in the end about how to reconcile the two. But first of all, I will talk about each of them separately. The reason for this seeming contradiction in Kant's thinking might be that this is not a main part of his philosophy. This is not something he really talked about systematically. Rather, he only really talks about this in two short texts. Both of these texts were produced at certain occasions. The one is an academic speech he gave at one time. The other is one of the three essays that he later published under the title The Conflict of Faculties, an essay which was written as a letter in response to Hufeland, a physician of the time, and a physician who had written to Kant and who had written a book that Kant was responding to, and a physician whom Kant very much respected and whom Kant considered a philosophical physician. Because, to be clear, while to Kant there is a separation between the physician and the philosopher insofar as they both are concerned with health, that doesn't mean that one person can't be both at the same time. Well, the first division Kant makes is that he says all of medicine, or as he also likes to call it, Hippocratics, after Hippocrates, the first of the physicians, all of Hippocratics can be separated into two parts, that is, therapeutics and dietetics. And of those, the former is what the physician should be concerned with, and the latter is the concern of the philosopher, Kant says. Therapeutics here means an art by which you try to cure illnesses, sicknesses, once they are there, once they have afflicted a person. Kant further splits the therapeutics into two parts. That is surgery, which he says is more mechanical, and which is, on the other hand, pharmacy, which is more chemical, he says. But both are the job of the physician. So, and whether the physician is mechanically, as a surgeon, working on your body, or whether he is giving you certain drugs and chemically working on your body, in both cases, he is trying to help your sick, your injured body to get better again. He is doing therapy. On the other hand, dietetics is more of a negative art of preventing an illness, of preventing health problems even appearing. Here I have to remark that nowadays, when we talk about a person's diet, we are mainly referring to what the person is eating, but the word comes from ancient Greek, and originally it had a much broader sense. It means something like the lifestyle, and it basically means a healthy lifestyle. So to Kant, dietetics is concerned with, yes, with what you eat, how much you eat, also when you eat. Should you just have one big meal per day, or should you have several smaller meals? But it is also concerned with, for example, how much movement do you need? Should you go for a daily walk, or how warm or cold should you be? Is it better to wash yourself, to shower with warm water or with cold water? Is it better to always keep your body and your womb very warm, or rather not as warm? Or it is also concerned with your sleeping. Is it good to nap, or should you only have one long sleep per day? And how long should your sleep be? All of those are questions for dietetics. And once again, dietetics therefore is a more negative art to keep your health, to prevent yourself from getting sick, while therapeutics is more positive and trying to cure your sickness once it has already afflicted you. If we look into Kant's notes, we can actually find a slightly different and slightly more complex split, because here Kant, alongside with dietetics, also talks about gymnastics, and both of them he combines under the umbrella term of hygiene. And hygiene too is a word we took from the ancient Greeks and have since narrowed down. So nowadays, when we hear hygiene, it's just about being clean mainly. But actually, the word means not cleanliness, but rather something like health in general, or healthy lifestyle. So therefore, hygiene would be about living healthy, and would be split in the more negative dietetics, which is meant to prevent you from getting ill, and the more positive gymnastics, which is meant to even improve your health, to make your body stronger, to make you more fit. So dietetics would then include stuff like not eating junk food, while gymnastics would include stuff like working out. I prefer this slightly more complex system that Kant gives in his notes, not least of all because it once again fits well with Fichte's fivefoldness. I briefly addressed this 2 lectures ago in my lecture on metaphysics. I mentioned how Fichte discovered that our thinking always ends up having this fivefold structure, always with 2 couples, one outer side, one inner side, and this fits well with it, because you could say that the therapeutics, here you are, as a patient, you are more passive, you are more of just in the role of the victim, and the physician is working on you to make you better again. And we could say that surgery is really working on the outside, while pharmacy, which gives you certain drugs that really get inside of your system, inside of your blood, inside of your metabolism, is more the inner art of therapy. And then on the other side, we could say that hygiene, here you are more active, you are more of a perpetrator, and it once again has these 2 parts, with dietetics being the more negative part, just preventing health issues, while gymnastics is the more positive part, and is actually trying to improve your health. Nevertheless, this structure of the Hippocratic arts can only be found in Kant's notes, which is also why almost no one, even lots of Kant experts, has ever heard of it, and you are not likely to hear of it in other sources on Kant, in other lectures or books on Kant either. In his published writings on the topic, the separation is more simple, and he just talks about therapeutics on the one side, once again being the concern of the physician, and dietetics on the other side, and the philosopher being concerned with dietetics. So I will stick with that for this lecture. And also I want to make clear that when Kant says this dietetics, or maybe hygiene in general, is the concern of the philosopher, he doesn't mean that the philosophers, so the professors of philosophy or whoever, should now open up their own practices, and people should now go and see them and ask them what they should eat or how they should sleep or whatever. Rather, I will once again remind you that everyone should aufklären themselves, and everyone should therefore become wise, become a philosopher in the word sense. And so what Kant is saying is that everyone should be responsible for his own diet. In fact, in his famous essay on Aufklärung, Kant gives 3 examples of unaufklärdness. One of them being when a book has intellect for me, the second being when a pastor has conscience for me. But the third one he gives is when a physician is judging my diet for me, instead of me, myself, judging my diet. So we can assume that Kant would not have been a fan of this abundance of dietitians and personal trainers and health coaches that we nowadays have, and that many people tend to follow blindly. He would consider that unaufklärt. He would consider that immature. He would say you have to take responsibility for your own health, and you and you have to use your own judgment to judge what is healthy for you and what is unhealthy for you. You can't just give that responsibility fully into someone else's hands. But why? Why is this a job for the philosopher and not for the physician? Well, for medicine, he would say, you need certain knowledge. You need to have studied it. The physician, to do his therapy, no matter whether it's through surgery or through pharmacy, must have knowledge about human biology, must have knowledge about human anatomy, must have knowledge about certain substances, certain drugs, and how the human body reacts to them. Must have knowledge about various illnesses, how they function, what their symptoms are, what is the best medicine to this or to that illness, and all of that is the job of an expert. All of that is something the philosopher, insofar as he hasn't studied medicine, can't do. But then, on the other hand, living a healthy lifestyle and helping yourself through that, preventing yourself from even getting ill, that is something Kant would say that can't just be done according to general rules that you can learn when studying medicine. Each body, each individual organism is too different. No two people are exactly the same, and therefore a healthy lifestyle is not the exact same for any given two people. Someone can digest this food well. To the other person, this food is not so healthy and is causing problems. Someone may need more sleep a day. Some other person may stay perfectly healthy and perfectly awake with a few hours of sleep less. So so here you can't simply be given general rules of what to do that can apply and hold true for every single person, but rather you have to carefully observe yourself and you have to judge what is good, what is healthy for yourself, what is improving your health, and what isn't. And I, for my part, can say that I have always done that. For example, when it comes to eating, I have always carefully listened to my body, to what my body needs, what my body is hungry for, without caring about what some nutrition expert or whoever would tell me what I need. And naturally, my body has always been hungry for the things I needed. I always got all the vitamins and so on I needed. And I always listened carefully. I even at some point in my life, some years ago, completely changed the way I eat. I suddenly started eating new things that previously I hadn't liked. And this wasn't a result of some plan, of someone telling me, well, you should start eating this because it's really healthy. It's not like I suddenly forced myself to eat something despite not liking the taste, but rather my taste changed and suddenly I felt hunger for something that previously I would have thought disgusting. And looking back, I now can see that this happened about the time when some big changes, some big transformations in my life, in my general way of living happened. and I can only assume that my body was adjusting and preparing for those changes. And likewise, I have found that sometimes when I was sick, I suddenly became hungry for certain food that I hadn't eaten in ages and hadn't really thought about before. But suddenly I craved it, and when I ate it, I very soon started feeling better again. I mean, this is something that is known to happen a lot to women during pregnancies, suddenly craving certain foods. But that is probably just when the body's signals are stronger because it's more important. But that doesn't mean that at other times the signals what the body needs aren't there as well. The issue, however, is that instead of training this, instead of learning to listen to their body, people are from very early childhood on mostly taught to not listen to their body. They are forced to eat certain things because the grown-ups have just decided that they have to eat this, that this is healthy, no matter what. I mean, I have a friend who was forced as a child one time to, I think, eat broccoli despite not wanting to, and he even threw up for that, and his parents just ended up getting angry and shooting at him for throwing up, as if he had done that on purpose. And this child abuse, because frankly that's what it is, and I won't call it any other thing, this child abuse was tried with me as well by my mother, by elementary school teachers, but luckily for the most part I was saved from this by my dad. And if you keep forcing a child to eat certain things despite not liking them, then you are training the child to not listen to its body. Because why should I listen to my body's signals if I'm not allowed to go with them anyways? If the adults prevent me, if the grown-ups prevent me from going with them. If, on the other hand, you let a child listen to its body and go with what its own body says it needs, then it can learn to listen better and better to these signals. And this is not just about what you eat. This goes for other things as well. For example, for staying warm. As a child, my dad always let me myself decide when I needed a jacket or pullover or whatever. Even though there were times when in winter, when it snowed, when we walked down the street together, him in his jacket and me in a t-shirt, when some people might have looked at him angrily, like he was the worst dad in the world. But he always had a jacket with him for me. And if I wanted it, I always got it. But the thing is, he didn't force it on me. Again, others did. Teachers in elementary school and the people in kindergarten, they forced me to wear a jacket despite already being warm a few times. And that's when I got sick. But my dad never did that. And thereby, I learned to really listen to my body's signals, to really be mindful and regardful of whether I felt warm or whether I felt cold and needed something to warm myself. But many children are just forced, even if it gets just a little cold, are just forced to dress maybe more warmly than they need. And that can only result in them unlearning to listen to their bodies. But this listening to your own body is indeed what is needed to live healthy. And doing that is philosophical, is wise. My dad always knew, even as a teen, that he wanted to be a healer of some sort. And he also knew pretty early on that he wanted to heal through the body. So he didn't want to become a psychotherapist or whatever. But in the end, he decided to not become a physician, but rather become a physiotherapist. And his life choices, or also the way he later did his work, was not influenced or informed by Kant, because he hadn't read these texts of Kant by that time. But in the words of Kant, I would say that he always approached his healing work, his physiotherapy, and his patients as a philosopher, because ultimately he would not give rules and directions how to move, how to use their own bodies, but rather he would teach the patients to listen to their own bodies. If some patient was wearing shoes that were uncomfortable and that didn't feel good, my dad would say, well, get better shoes. And then maybe the patient would say, oh, but these shoes are very healthy. They have been designed by some orthopedist. But still, my dad would say, well, that may be, but they clearly seem to not be designed for your body and your body's needs. You shouldn't care what some orthopedist says. He is not the one living in your body. You are. You should listen to your body saying, I can't walk in these shoes. Or likewise, people sometimes get it into their mind, let themselves be told that they have to always sit perfectly straight. And then my dad would tell them, no, there is not the one perfect way to carry your body anyways. There is not the one perfect stance, the one perfect way of sitting. I mean, our bodies are made to change position. They are made to move anyways. You shouldn't sit for hours and hours and hours in just one way. You should shift sometimes. If your body tells you that you should shift your weight a little, that you should shift your weight a little on one side and then a little on the other side, or that you should fold your legs over each other and then unfold them again, you should listen to your body. And you should not, out of some concepts, out of some ideology, so to say, force yourself to always be perfectly straight, but rather you should listen to what the body is asking for. And these sort of aufkläred dietetics, where you listen to your own body and where you try to do what is good for your body and not do what is bad for your body, that is very important for health, Kant would say, because he would say that, well, the best medicine is just not getting sick. So do what you can to prevent yourself from even needing the physician. But Kant was also very much aware that the unaufkläred people are driven by laziness. And he was very much aware that the unaufkläred people always try to avoid responsibility. They just want to mindlessly go through life, damage their own bodies, poison their own bodies with unhealthy food, with drugs, live an unhealthy lifestyle. And when the consequences of that hit, they turn to medicine, they turn to the physician, they turn to therapeutics, and they basically want a magic solution to just fix whatever they broke. Kant considered the pharmacies basically shops of poison, and he tried to live his life without drugs, without pills, and was proud of the fact that he only took one pill, a daily pill for digestion. But apart from that, he never took any medicines, and still never really got sick. And likewise, I can say myself that at least so far, I have only ever taken one sort of pill. And I know many people, I know teenagers who are half my age, and in a single month, they are taking more pills and more drugs than I have taken all my life. The unaufkläred person is not living as a victim, is not living passively. So the healthcare person will try not to depend on the physician and on certain drugs to fix him up, but rather the healthcare person is active, is a perpetrator and shaper of his own life, and therefore he will try to just not break anything so that nothing will need fixing. Well, that is the one division Kant makes between medicine and philosophy. In another instance, he splits them by saying that the physician is healing through the body. Once again, he may do that through surgery or through pharmacy, but he is always healing through the body. While on the other hand, the philosopher is healing through the mind. So one could assume that Kant would say that something like psychotherapy, because it is not doing anything to the body, but rather doing something to the mind, is the job not of the physician, but of the philosopher. Which might also be one justification why certain psychologists and psychotherapists, someone like Freud or like his student Reich, might be included in a broader history of philosophy, and why I in the future would like to talk about them. While on the other hand, actual physicians in the stricter sense don't belong into such a history. However, I want to clarify that Kant, once again, is not making a material but a formal distinction. Just like, as I already talked about in previous lectures, between philosophy and mathematics, or between metaphysics and applied science, or between scientific cognition and common cognition, Kant again and again makes distinctions not by different objects that are dealt with, but rather by different principles through which any given objects are approached. And this is what he does here too. So he's not saying that the physician is only healing the body, only has the body as his object, and the philosopher is only healing the mind. No. He says that the physician might also heal the mind, but through the body. So Kant does say that madness, insanity, often may have a cause in the body, and therefore the insane person should be given over to the physician and be treated by the physician. This is once again something in which Kant agrees with Nietzsche, who also says that problems of the psyche will have some sort of hidden physiological reason. And this is, of course, also what shortly after Nietzsche Freud talked. And what later Reich expanded on, that there are physical, there are biological, there are sexual, in their case, reasons for people having psychological problems. Now, in Kant's case, he's not saying that the reason for the insanity will be a sexual reason, some sort of sexual problem and dissatisfaction, like Freud or Reich would later say. Rather, he suspects digestive reasons, and therefore he says that some madman would be better off if we didn't try to argue with them, to employ reason and to convince them through rational arguments that their illusions are wrong, but rather a physician should just give them a laxative and purge them, and that would probably help them better. But the basic thought that the reason for this psychological condition, this psychological illness, is actually some sort of illness or problem with the body. That is already a first step on the route that later thinkers then went down on. On the other hand, Kant would say that the philosopher can also help the body in certain cases. Can help with pains, with fits of the body, but he is always doing so through the mind. So then the difference between the physician and the philosopher is not that they have different objects they treat, that one would be concerned with the health of the body and the other with the health of the mind, but rather that they have different ways of treating and of caring for health. One working through the body, the other working through the mind. So I will say that Kant is not always 100% consistent with this. So he does say in one instance that when the physician is giving antidepressants to a patient, which already existed, already were known back then, he is basically acting as a philosopher. Based on Kant's own principles, I would disagree with him here, because surely he is affecting the psyche, but he is doing so through the body, through chemicals, through pharmaceutical means. The patient here is a victim of the drug and of the physician giving him the drug. He is passive. What would be a more interesting question, I think, would be whether giving placebos is the job of the physician or of the philosopher. Because when you take a placebo and get better through it, it is the mind healing the body. You believe that you are being healed through your body, through some drug, but actually you are healing yourself through your mind, exactly by believing that your body has just received some help. So that would be a more interesting question, I think, but that is something Kant doesn't really give an answer on. Anyways, here I want to make a short digression into the history of medicine. Just a short one, because this really isn't my field of expertise. But back in the 18th century, in Germany, there were two prominent theories of medicine that were in conflict with each other, going back to two professors of medicine called Hoffmann and Stahl, who had both at more or less the same time talked at the University of Halle. Hoffmann was more of an empiricist out of the two. He wanted to concentrate on what could be empirically observed. And, well, what is it in life that you can empirically observe? It is the body and it is the movement of the body. Hoffmann said that movement is ultimately the observable phenomenon of life. It is the part of life that we really know about. Living organisms move themselves, unlike things that don't live. His theory was that the body could be considered and treated as a biological machine of sorts. That is also why the followers of Hoffmann were called the mechanists. And illness meant that something in this machine was broken and the machine couldn't really move as it should anymore. And now you had to somehow fix and repair the material body, be it through surgery or through certain drugs, to fix its movement again. When it's sick, that means that the movement is somehow disturbed and it's not moving as it should. And you have to make sure, just like when you fix a broken machine, you have to make sure it can move without problem again. Now, against this, what Stahl said is that life requires a soul or a spirit. He said that matter, so that which we can observe and whose movement we can observe, matter in itself, crude matter, is lifeless. And the only thing turning a lifeless object into a living being, and therefore also into a being which can move itself, is the soul, is the spirit. That is why followers of Stahl were called animists, after the Latin word for soul, anima. And they believed that the symptoms, the physical symptoms of a sickness, were just symptoms of some issue with the soul. The soul, so to say, had somewhat lost control of the body that it is usually animating and giving life to. And therefore, the job of the physician had to be giving aid to the soul, healing the soul, so to speak, so that it could take full control of the body again. The theory was that a healthy soul could heal its own body, could deal with illnesses by itself. So you were not really curing the actual illness, or rather the actual illness, what we consider the illness, was just the symptoms. You were curing the issues of the soul, and therefore enabling the soul to get rid of the physical symptoms. These different theories on the medicine of the human also meant that to Hoffmann and the mechanists, there was no fundamental difference between human medicine and veterinary medicine. So since the body is just a biological machine that somehow is broken and not moving correctly anymore, and you are just fixing it through mechanical or chemical means, treating a human being or treating an animal really works the same. While to Stahl and the animists, there was a fundamental difference. Animals might be treated more like Hoffman and the mechanists are doing it, because you can't really affect their souls. You can't really talk to them and through reason convince them to live a different lifestyle or whatever. But the human being should be treated fundamentally differently than a sick animal would be treated by a physician. In this conflict, Kant didn't want to take part. Once again, to him it was very important to respect the borders and the separations between the sciences. So even though his own philosophical theories are more close to the theory of Stahl, I will address that in much later lectures when I talk about Kant's theories on natural science. But he too believed that matter in itself was lifeless and without motion, and needed to be animated by some soul. But even though, he still said that this conflict, insofar as it was a conflict within medicine and a conflict about how to treat sick people, had to be decided by the experts. Nevertheless, Kant said it is the philosopher's job to find out more about the soul, and also to find out to what degree or if the soul can influence the body. And the philosopher, insofar as he is a philosopher and insofar as he is trying to heal or to care for a person's health, as a philosopher, has to work in a more Stahlist, in a more animist way. Because if you're working in a Hoffmanist, in a mechanist way, you are definitely not doing philosophy anymore. You are definitely working as a physician. So, to Kant, the philosopher's job is to somehow help the mind, and the mind, Kant believed, does affect the body in certain ways. For example, one proof for him was that it seems that an epileptic fit, when others observe it, when it happens in front of other people, can cause others to join in, to also have an epileptic fit. And clearly Kant says here, what is affected is not their body, it is just their minds. And because they observe this, their minds seem to make their bodies go into a fit as well. So he believed that the mind has a certain influence over the body, and making use of that influence for health would be the job of the philosopher. And that is why Kant's essay on the conflict between medicine and philosophy deals with the question as to whether and to what degree a person can master his feelings of sickness merely through his mind and through his resolution, through his self-discipline and through his reining in of his passions. Now, of course, Kant doesn't believe that you can just heal yourself from any possible illness, like you can heal yourself from COVID or from AIDS through sheer willpower. He's not saying any such nonsense. He does say that there are limits to the healing art of the philosopher, so to speak, where the patient has to turn over to the physician. But he is saying that a philosophical lifestyle, a philosophical stance can help with many health problems, mainly with any sort of convulsions, seizures, spasms, he says. That is where the mind can take control to a large degree and can help the body. So he was convinced that when you have an epileptic fit or a coughing fit, that is where the mind can help and where self-discipline can help, where you don't necessarily have to just give in to that fit and the convulsions of the body, but rather where you can remain in control and, even if not completely make the feeling of having to cough or whatever go away, you still can be able to lessen the feeling or to push it aside and to not be afflicted by it so much. And Kant would say that various issues like if you can't fall asleep, or if you have certain pain that won't go away, or if you have strong thirst that for the moment can't be stilled, that is where philosophy comes into play. And here what you should mainly employ is what Kant calls a stoic remedy. And he certainly was influenced here by the ancient Roman Stoics and by his early reading and lifelong love and admiration for ancient Roman literature. Stoicism, after all, is about having peace of the soul and having a sort of self-control and self-discipline, about not being a victim of outside forces, but rather realizing through your reason that some things just can't be helped. They just can't be changed. They are not in your power, and therefore it is not reasonable to worry about them. Rather, it is reasonable to focus on that which is in your own power, and that is your own soul. That is your own mindset, so to speak, your own stance. And this Stoic remedy, Kant says, can be applied in many instances. So what you should do is not give in to certain feelings of illness, but stay in control. So, for example, when your nose is blocked, Kant gives the tip that you don't have to constantly sniff, but rather you can sort of ignore that feeling and still breathe through your nose, even if it's a little harder. And with time, Kant says, you will get used to breathing through your blocked nose. You will do it automatically, and even in your sleep you will do it automatically instead of breathing through your open mouth and snoring. And thereby the nose might not actually get unblocked, but it being blocked will bother you less, and you will pay less mind to it. And the same can be employed when you have problems falling asleep. Kant would say, well, if you just focus on not being able to sleep, if you maybe get worried or angry, telling yourself, oh, goddamn, I have to sleep already, I need to get up early in the morning, why can't I fall asleep? And then just toss around endlessly for hours, then you will just get more awake. You won't find any sleep. Instead, Kant says you should not focus on not being able to sleep. You should put your mind to other things. You should think on some random things, preferably things that come with a lot of associations, so that you start thinking about one thing and your mind starts wandering over to other things and to the next thing and so on. And before you know it, you will probably have drifted off to sleep, Kant would say. And the same can be employed when you have pain that you can't just make go away. You don't have to focus on that pain. You can focus on other things, Kant would say. Here I will remind you of what I said about foolishness in the last lecture, about the opposite of wisdom. Being foolish, I said, to Kant essentially means focusing on something which doesn't matter so much or which you can't change, and thereby forgetting the actual higher purpose, thereby forgetting and sacrificing what you should really focus on. So, and I already said in that lecture, when you have a sickness that can't be cured at the moment, when you suffer from a certain pain that at the moment can't be made to go away, then it is not rational to really give into that pain and focus on nothing else but your current suffering, and to just moan and complain and whine, because thereby you will just sort of double that pain. Now you have the physical pain that you are feeling in your body, and you have, so to speak, the pain that your mind feels about feeling pain. Rather, it is rational to just pay no mind to what can't be changed anyways, to just put that pain aside and focus on more important things. And thereby, the pain may not completely vanish, but it will bother you less. I'm reminded of a story my dad would always like telling about me as a very small child of maybe 1 or 2 years, when I was sick, and there was some acquaintance of us coming over for a visit, and she got concerned with me, and she asked him, don't you want to do something? Don't you want to give him some medicine or put him into bed or whatever? The poor boy keeps sniffing and coughing. And my dad just said, well, look at him. He's happy. He's joyful. He's playing with his train or whatever. So I did have this sickness, and I did have the physical symptoms. I did cough and everything. But my mind was at ease. My mind was still serene and joyful, because I just didn't focus on that. I focused on my game, on my playing. But nowadays we have this culture of sensitivity and of complaining and whining, which is pretty much the opposite of Stoicism. And that leads to people not feeling better, but feeling worse. And here I might mention that to Kant, the opposite of the philosopher in the field of medicine and of health is the hypochondriac. Because this is a person who is also afflicting himself and his own conditions through his mind, but not in a positive way, making himself feel more healthy, but rather in a negative way, making himself feel less healthy, because he maybe just has some small problem. Maybe he's feeling a little headache or whatever. But then he probably has heard that this small problem could be a symptom of this or that terrible illness. And now he's afraid of this illness. He is afraid of what might happen. And thereby he's turning his small problem into a big problem. thereby he is making himself feel much worse than he would have to. And this is not wise, this is foolish. This is the opposite of a philosophical medicine. So if I were to put the second description Kant gives of the role of the philosopher in healing and health, if I were to put it into my own words, into my own terminology, I would say what I basically already said, that in medicine, to the physician, the patient is a victim. The patient is passive. The patient is the victim of some sickness, and now he is the victim in the positive sense of the physician and of some drug, of some cure that is supposed to take that sickness away again. And therefore, the orientation here is pathological or pathogenetical orientation. So pathos being the suffering. So the physician would be oriented on someone suffering, and how did this suffering come about? What is this sickness? And how can we cure this suffering? While on the other hand, the philosopher would see the person as a perpetrator, as someone active who can to some degree be responsible for himself and his own condition. And so his orientation would be more salutological or salutogenetical. So that being orientation on healthiness and on getting healthy again, and on what lifestyle, what stance of the mind is healthy and is ensuring the continuation of health. And here I once again have to think of my dad, who always was a great example of this philosophical stance towards your own health for me. He had been diagnosed very early on, even in his teens, with arthrosis in his knees, and some physician had prophesied that he would eventually need to sit in a wheelchair and not be able to walk properly anymore. But he became an unparalleled expert of motion, of movement, of working together with your own body, which would greatly help him in his physiotherapy. And he learned how to move in a way to not be bothered by his arthrosis. That doesn't mean that it would just vanish, and at times it might afflict him more strongly than at other times. I still remember sometime during my high school years, for some days or a week or something, it affected him quite strongly, and he had quite a pain in his knees, and any other person would probably have stayed in bed, but he still kept going to his patients and visiting them at their homes. He would just walk very slowly and very carefully, and in a way that the pain wouldn't be too strong. But he managed to walk with it, and to find a way of walking where the pain would go away again. And I also still remember one discussion between him and my uncle. My uncle had at the time had a heel spur, and he insisted that it was his car's fault. that the car had been constructed in a bad way, and that he had gotten the heel spur from the gas pedal. Well, my dad, however, insisted that this car was not unique. It was not one of a kind, but rather many such identical cars had been produced, and not everyone driving this type of car was now suffering from a heel spur. So what he was saying was that my uncle was not simply a victim of the car. Maybe the car had been constructed badly. Maybe you could have constructed it in a better way. But still, even if you have a bad car, just like if you have bad knees, you can still move in a way with this bad car so that your body stays fine and healthy, or you can move your body in a way and press down your foot in a way that hurts your body. So, in the words of Kant, one could maybe say that my uncle considered his pain and his heel spur to be a case for the physician, while my dad considered it to be a case for the philosopher. And he would always, once again, he would always treat his patients as a philosopher. He would try to show them how to listen to their own bodies and how to act with their own bodies and move with their bodies, even if their bodies maybe weren't in the best condition. Many patients would probably feel like victims and complain because they had some condition, they couldn't walk properly. But then it could happen that some old woman, when shown a better stance, a more balanced stance, so to say, by my dad, would suddenly exclaim with joy, "Oh, it can feel so light," because she just had never known that it was possible with the body she had to not feel so burdened and dragged down, but to feel more lightly while walking and while standing. So that's the two descriptions Kant gives of the difference between medicine and philosophy. And I would say that even if it may appear so on the surface, they don't contradict each other. If you actually read the two texts that we have from Kant about this topic, even though they are some years apart, and even though the actual definition given for the philosopher as a healer is different, you can quite easily see that the actual content is quite similar, and the actual matter that Kant cared about or that Kant tried to say is more or less the same. And I would say that we can bring these two different distinctions together. To me, the second one, so the physician healing through the body, the philosopher healing through the mind, is the better one, because it is a distinction based on different principles. But I think it fits more or less with the first one, because the therapeutics is done mainly through the body. If you already got sick, if you already have some sort of illness, then you mainly need to be treated through the body. The mind alone won't make some virus go away. While on the other hand, dietetics, or maybe all of hygiene, so including gymnastics, where you are more of an active perpetrator, well, that is where the mind is taking control of the body, and where the mind is working to stay healthy or to even improve your health. But I would say what it actually is all about, no matter if we go with the first or with the second distinction, what it actually is about is the distinction between the scientist as the technician of reason and the philosopher as the lawgiver of reason. So that distinction about which I talked in general in the last lecture, and for which this lecture was supposed to give a more concrete example. Because the physician is such a technician of reason. He is someone who has learned something, who has a scholarly education, and with his scholarship, with his knowledge, he tries to heal. So the physician, as a physician, is not aufklärt, doesn't have to be aufklärt. Of course, as a person, as a human being, a physician can be an aufklärt person, but insofar as he is a physician, he has nothing directly to do with Aufklärung. And also his patient, I already said that his patient is basically in the role of a victim towards him, so the patient too doesn't have to be aufklärt. All the physician needs is the correct knowledge of the body, knowledge of various illnesses, of various cures. On the other hand, the philosopher acts as the lawgiver of reason. He doesn't just learn some general rules and concepts that you can learn when you study medicine, for example, but he comes up himself with laws that reason gives us for a rational lifestyle, for a rational stance and conduct, and he orders us, or orders himself, because once again, everyone should be a philosopher in the world sense, and everyone should care for his own health in a philosophical way. He orders himself to follow these laws of reason. He treats his patient or himself as an active perpetrator who has responsibility for his own health and who maybe can't control everything about his health, but at least can make his illnesses, if not making them vanish altogether, at least can make them more bearable by the way he conducts his life and by the way his mind is set. By what he does or doesn't do. And that could already be enough to justify calling this philosophical healing, because in a broader sense, or after a sort of analogy, Kant says, any sort of lawgiver could be called a philosopher. But of course, the true philosopher is only the moral lawgiver. But this too is relevant here. Because in Kant's moral philosophy, I will address this in later lectures when I talk about this moral philosophy. In Kant's moral philosophy, there are not just duties we have against other people, like not murdering someone, not stealing from someone, and so on. But we also have duties against ourselves. We have to not just have regard and reverence for other people's humanity, but also for our own. We have to treat ourselves and conduct ourselves as rational beings. That is our own moral duty. And therefore, certain lifestyles, certain actions that might harm our health, like just mindlessly partying and eating junk food and taking drugs or whatever, to Kant would be morally forbidden, because it goes against our dignity as rational beings. Well then, the same things that morality forbids, because it is against our dignity, prudence also forbids, because it is against our health. And in this case, too, Kant says, the philosopher as the moral lawgiver can also be a healer of sorts as a medical lawgiver, because the same laws that are moral laws for our conduct also happen to be good health advice. That is, to rein in and control our passions, to not blindly follow all our passions and base animal desires, and that is to not indulge and thereby throw away our health. So once again, what Kant recommends here is a certain stoicism. In fact, he says that the motto of dietetics, of this philosophical art of dietetics, the motto could be the Stoic motto of sustine and abstine. That is, sustain and abstain. Or in other words, as Kant translates it, endure or bear and stay away from. And if you follow this rational maxim, so enduring what can't be changed, enduring what you have to endure instead of giving in to the suffering and whining about it, on the other hand, abstaining and staying away from extremes, from anything unhealthy, if you follow that maxim of reason, then you are both living a moral and dignified life as well as a healthy life, Kant would say. So I do want to clarify, because this is a common misconception, that this stoicism and this life free from passions and this abstaining from indulgences is not the same as complete asceticism, and is not the same as not giving yourself any pleasures at all. Rather, Kant is recommending, and Kant lived himself, a more Epicurean lifestyle where you do enjoy your life, where you do give yourself pleasures, enjoy good food, for example, or good conversations with friends, but where you don't overdo it, where you don't seek extremes. Kant is in line with basically all the ancient Greek philosophers, be it the Epicureans or be it Aristotle, in believing that the key to a good that is both a healthy, a happy, and also a moral, a virtuous lifestyle is temperance, is moderation. But it is not living as a complete monk or whatever. In fact, he discusses at some point the death of Moses Mendelssohn, the famous philosopher of the Haskalah, what is considered the Jewish Enlightenment. And Mendelssohn had died amidst the pantheism controversy. So when Jacobi, another important thinker of 18th century Germany, when Jacobi had accused Mendelssohn's dead friend Lessing of having been a pantheist and basically an atheist, and Mendelssohn ended up in a controversy with Jacobi and trying to defend the memory of his friend Lessing. And amidst that, he died. Many back then accused Jacobi of essentially having killed Mendelssohn, saying that it had all just been too much for the old man's frail heart. But Kant actually said that no, Mendelssohn had walked his death up in himself, because Mendelssohn had had digestive issues for quite some time, and because of those he would hardly eat anything, so as to avoid causing himself discomfort. And Kant would say this was the cause for his death, that he basically starved himself. And he says, rather than doing that, so trying to avoid a little suffering and therefore living an unhealthy lifestyle and not eating enough, Mendelssohn should rather have eaten and enjoyed his food and given his body the sustenance it needed, and just suffered through the digestive problems and the slight discomfort, and just stoically live with it and try to get over it. And then he would probably have lived longer. So this example should show that Kant is not saying, for example, don't eat food, don't enjoy your food. No, do eat good food, do enjoy it. Don't stuff yourself with food so you become fat and die early, but also don't starve yourself, then you will also die early. Again, just as the ancients would have said, everything in moderation. Now, to conclude this lecture, I just want to mention that all of this is not just random theoretical musings that Kant made because he felt like it, but rather this is a very personal or very important topic to Kant, because he himself did suffer from bad health and from a certain frailty of body all throughout his life, saying that he never was truly healthy and in a truly strong condition. And especially in his younger years, he said that he had quite hypochondriac tendencies. And the main problem seems to have been what he calls a small chest that didn't leave much space for his heart and for his lungs. A small chest which he claimed to have inherited from his mother. Apparently, he looked very much like his mother in general, and she already seems to have had similar problems with breathing. And I mean, this was a time when medicine was less advanced than today, and many people were dying much earlier. So it is quite possible that Kant, if he had been less aufkläred than he was, too would have died early because of his small chest and because of his breathing problems. But just like my dad with his knees, which I already mentioned, he found a way of dealing with his body, even if his body was not optimal, and of living with his body. He wasn't at war with his body. He wasn't whining about his body being the way it was, but rather he found a way to work together with his body and live with this small and narrow chest. And with that, he survived most of his friends, even though many of them had been much healthier than he was throughout their lives. And with that, he also managed to never miss a single lecture because of illness or something. He would say that he always felt kind of sickly, but never actually got sick. He never let that feeling of sickliness affect him, but rather stoically left aside what couldn't be changed and focused on what was more important, be it his philosophical work, but also his life, meeting with his friends, having dinner parties together, enjoying himself. And this, I would say, is quite typical. This is not just something that is specific to Kant and to Kant's character, but rather this is philosophical in general. This is typical for the philosopher. You can find a stance like that in many philosophers. I already mentioned my dad. I could mention an ancient philosopher like Epicure. Instead, I just want to mention Nietzsche here because I already previously said that there are quite a few parallels between Nietzsche's and Kant's thinking, despite what people usually believe. And here we have one such parallel because Nietzsche, even more so than Kant probably, was very sickly, at times being nearly blind, at times being plagued by very strong daily headaches, at times throwing up daily. And Nietzsche also, in a way, became his own physician, curing himself, being very concerned with what he should eat, which air he should breathe, so which area was most healthy to him, and so on. And trying to find a lifestyle that had the best conditions for him and that would improve his health. And Nietzsche, in a way, considered his philosophy or philosophy in general to be a cure for illness. So here, once again, we have a parallel between those two, and even if they might have disagreed on other topics, this their health and how they dealt with it is probably something they would have been able to have quite extensive conversations on, and this is probably something where they would have found agreement. But with that, I conclude my lecture on the relationship between philosophy and medicine according to Kant, and I hope that this could give some more insight into what Kant means when he says the philosopher, in the world sense, as the wise person, is a lawgiver and, above all else, a moral lawgiver, rather than simply a technician of reason. My deep thanks be to my supporters: Kubilai Celik, Thomas Deuringer, Garnau Klaufen, Benjamin Lening, Oblomov, Samit Özkilic, Christos Pai, Alexander Reuter, Elif Özün, Yasin Özün, as well as to all others who support me and my aufkläring course.